No shouting, no warning. She suddenly leaned forward, grabbed the black waitress's arms, and bit down hard. The restaurant froze. A fork hit the floor. Someone gasped. The waitress cried out in shock, not even understanding what had just happened. And that's when, across the room, a man who hadn't spoken all night slowly stood up. If you believe cruelty should never go unpunished, tap the like button right now and subscribe, because this story proves what happens when someone crosses the wrong line, especially when they don't know who's watching. The evening shift at Lumiere began the same way it had for the past 3 months, with Alia Daniels checking her reflection in the staff bathroom mirror, smoothing down her uniform and reminding herself that exhaustion was temporary, but her daughter's future was permanent. 28 years old, single mother, 2 jobs, 3 hours of sleep on a good night. The math was brutal, but it was her math, and she'd made peace with it the day she held her daughter Amara in the hospital and promised her a better life than the one she'd inherited. That promise had led her here, to this pristine palace of wealth, where a single entree cost more than her weekly grocery budget, where she smiled through condescension and kept her dignity tucked away, like the tips she'd count later on the bus ride home. Alia had learned quickly that Lumiere wasn't just a restaurant, it was theater. The guests didn't come here just to eat. They came to be seen, to display their success like the jewelry that caught the candlelight, to speak in hushed tones about deals and trips and problems that money could solve. She'd become invisible here, which was exactly what good service required. Be attentive but not intrusive, be present but forgettable. Tonight felt different, though she couldn't say why. The main dining room hummed with the usual Friday evening energy, soft jazz playing beneath the murmur of conversation, the delicate clink of crystal, the occasional burst of restrained laughter. Alia moved through it all with practiced efficiency, balancing trays, refilling glasses, her face set in that professional mask of pleasant neutrality that she'd perfected over months of double shifts. Her section tonight was full. Table 8 had the anniversary couple who'd barely looked at her. Table 12 had the business associates who kept checking their phones. Table 15 had the elderly woman dining alone, who'd smiled kindly at Alia and left a generous tip last week. And then there was Table 9. The woman had arrived 20 minutes ago, and Alia had felt the shift in atmosphere immediately. Beautiful in that sharp, maintained way that money bought. Flawless skin, designer dress, hair styled with precision that suggested a standing appointment at an exclusive salon. But there was something brittle beneath the polish, something hungry and wounded in the way her eyes swept the room. Minseo. Alia didn't know her name yet. She only knew the tension that radiated from the table, the way the woman's companion, a younger woman who looked uncomfortable, kept checking her phone as if hoping for an excuse to leave. Water, Minseo had said when Alia first approached. Not water, please, or could I have water? Just water, delivered with the kind of casual dismissiveness that turned service workers into furniture. Alia had smiled and brought the water, had taken their orders, seared duck for Minseo, the salmon for her companion, and retreated to put the tickets in, her feet already aching in the practical shoes she'd bought secondhand. She didn't notice the man in the corner booth. Nobody did, really. That was the point. Choi Hyun-jun had perfected the art of being overlooked. In his line of work, invisibility was survival, and he'd learned long ago that power didn't need to announce itself. Let others wear their wealth like armor. Let them demand attention and recognition. He preferred the shadows, the quiet observation, the ability to see everything while revealing nothing. Tonight, he'd come to Lumiere for a meeting that had ended an hour ago. His associates had left. He could have left too. Should have. But something had kept him in his seat, nursing a single glass of whiskey, watching the restaurant's careful choreography unfold. That's when he'd noticed her. The waitress with the tired eyes and the genuine smile. She moved differently than the others, less performance, more purpose. He'd seen her slip a bread roll into her apron pocket when she thought no one was looking, had watched her face soften with something like guilt, before she smoothed her expression back into professional neutrality. For her kid, he'd thought. She's taking it home for her kid. There was a story in those tired eyes, in the careful way she moved, in the dignity she maintained even as she served people who looked through her like glass. Hyunjun had always been good at reading people. It was how he'd survived this long, and he read her in an instant. Single mother, working multiple jobs, holding it together by force of will alone. He respected that. Survival was something he understood intimately. His phone buzzed. A text from Jae-sung, his second in command. All clear. Ready when you are. Hyunjun ignored it. He wasn't ready yet. Something in the air felt wrong, charged with the kind of tension that preceded violence. Years of living on the edge of danger had given him instincts he'd learned never to ignore, and right now, those instincts were screaming. His eyes drifted across the room and landed on table 9. And there she was. Min Seo. The recognition hit him like a fist to the chest, followed immediately by a cold, settling anger. Of course she was here. Of course she'd found her way back to the places where they'd once existed together, back when he'd been young and stupid enough to mistake beauty for substance, desire for compatibility. She looked the same. Older, sharper, but the same. The same way she held herself like the world owed her something. The same predatory elegance that had once attracted him and now repulsed him. He'd ended things with Min Seo 2 years ago, and it had been ugly. She hadn't accepted it well. Hadn't accepted that his world, his business, his life required a level of discretion and control that she couldn't provide. She'd been erratic, jealous, dangerous in her instability. The final straw had come when she'd endangered one of his operations with her recklessness, when her need for drama and attention had nearly cost him everything. He'd cut her off completely. From his life, from his resources, from the lifestyle he'd provided. She'd screamed, threatened, begged. He'd remained unmoved. In his world, mercy was often mistaken for weakness, and weakness got you killed. He hadn't seen her since. And now here she was, sitting in his restaurant. He was a silent investor, owned 30% of Lumiere though few people knew it, looking like she owned the place. Her eyes scanning the room with that familiar mixture of entitlement and resentment. Hyunjun's grip tightened on his glass. This wouldn't end well. He could feel it in his bones. Aaliyah approached table 9 with the entrees balanced perfectly on her serving tray. The duck for the elegant woman, the salmon for her increasingly uncomfortable companion. Simple, professional. She'd done this 1,000 times. Seared duck, she said pleasantly, setting the plate in front of Min Seo with practiced precision. And the salmon. The garnish is wrong. Aaliyah paused, the salmon plate hovering above the table. I'm sorry? Min Seo didn't look up, just gestured dismissively at her plate. The garnish. I specifically said no microgreens. Are you deaf or just incompetent? The words landed like slaps. Aaliyah's smile didn't waver. Years of customer service had taught her to absorb these moments, to let them roll off like water, but something flickered behind her eyes. Hurt, maybe? Or exhaustion finally breaching the surface. I apologize, she said, her voice steady. I don't have a note about that in my order, but let me check with you people, Min Seo cut in, finally looking up, her eyes cold and assessing. You never listen. You take orders. You nod along, and then you do whatever you want anyway. Is it really that difficult to follow simple instructions? You people. The restaurant had gone quieter. Not silent, that would be too obvious. But conversations had lowered, attention subtly shifting toward table 9 like iron filings drawn to a magnet. Aaliyah felt the heat creep up her neck. Her daughter's face flashed through her mind. Amara, 6 years old, gap-toothed smile, waiting at home with Aaliyah's mother who could barely afford to babysit but did it anyway, because family was family. This job paid for Amara's after-school program, for her books, for the small comforts that made childhood bearable. "Let me bring you a new plate," Aaliyah said quietly, reaching for the duck. Minseo's hand shot out, gripping Aaliyah's wrist. "No. I want you to explain to me why you can't do your job properly. I want to understand what makes you think you can waste my time like this." The touch was aggressive, possessive. Aaliyah's professional mask cracked slightly. "Ma'am, please let go of my arm." "You know what your problem is?" Minseo leaned forward, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper that somehow carried in the quiet restaurant. "You think you belong here. You think if you smile enough, if you're polite enough, people like us will forget what you really are. But we don't forget. We see exactly what you are." Aaliyah's companion looked mortified. "Minseo, stop." "Shut up." Minseo didn't even glance at her. Her entire focus was on Aaliyah, and there was something unhinged in her eyes now, something that had been building beneath the surface and was finally breaking through. Aaliyah tried to pull her arm back gently. "Ma'am, I'm going to get the manager." And that's when Minseo snapped. Later, witnesses would describe it differently. Some would say there was no warning. Others would swear they saw it coming in the split second before it happened. The way Minseo's face twisted, the way her grip on Aaliyah's wrist tightened. In one swift, shocking motion, Minseo yanked Aaliyah's arm toward her and bit down. Hard. The sound Aaliyah made wasn't a scream. It was something more primal. Shock and pain and disbelief compressed into a single gasping cry. She jerked backward, finally breaking Minseo's grip, her other hand flying to the wound. A fork hit the floor with a sharp clatter. Someone gasped. A woman at table 12 made a small, horrified sound. The restaurant froze. Aaliyah stood there, shaking, staring at her arm where teeth marks were already beginning to darken the skin. Her mind couldn't process it, couldn't make sense of what had just happened. She'd been bitten. Actually bitten. Like an animal. Minseo sat back in her chair, a small, satisfied smile playing at her lips. She picked up her napkin, dabbed delicately at the corner of her mouth, and looked at Aaliyah with something like triumph. "Now go get your manager," she said softly, "and tell him I want to speak to him about your unprofessional behavior." The shock was absolute. Aaliyah's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Her arm throbbed. The entire restaurant was staring at her. Not at Minseo, not at the woman who'd just committed assault in a room full of witnesses, but at her, the waitress. The one who'd somehow caused this. The one who'd failed to maintain decorum. She felt naked, exposed, dehumanized. And then, across the room, a chair scraped against the floor. Choi Hyunjun stood slowly, and somehow, that simple motion changed everything. He wasn't a large man, average height, lean build, but presence had nothing to do with size. It was in the way he moved, economical and controlled. In the way his eyes swept the room with the cold assessment of someone who'd seen violence up close and understood its weight. In the aura of quiet danger that preceded him like a pressure wave. The restaurant staff noticed first. A busboy froze mid-motion. The sommelier's eyes widened in recognition. The manager, who'd been moving toward table 9, stopped dead in his tracks. Because they knew, the staff always knew, Mr. Choi was here. Hyunjun moved through the dining room with deliberate calm, his footsteps barely audible on the polished floor. He didn't rush. Rushing suggested panic, and he never panicked. His hands remained loose at his sides, his expression neutral. But anyone who knew how to read violence could see the coiled tension in his frame. Behind him, in the shadows near his booth, 2 men materialized. They'd been there all along. His security, invisible until needed. They followed at a discreet distance, their presence a silent promise. Minseo was still basking in her moment of twisted victory, still smirking at Aaliyah's shock and pain when she felt the attention shift. Felt the weight of eyes that weren't looking at the waitress anymore. They were looking past her. She turned, annoyed, ready to snap at whoever dared interrupt her, and saw him. The blood drained from her face. Hyunjun, she breathed, and all the confidence, all the cruelty, evaporated like morning mist. Her hands fluttered to her throat, to her hair, an unconscious grooming gesture born of old habits. I didn't know you were. I didn't see you. He didn't acknowledge her. Not yet. His attention was entirely on Aliyah, who stood frozen, clutching her arm, tears now sliding silently down her cheeks despite her best efforts. Are you injured? His voice was soft, almost gentle, but it carried through the silent restaurant like a bell. Aliyah blinked, disoriented. What? Your arm. Are you injured? She looked down at the bite mark, at the angry red impression of teeth on her dark skin, and something about his calm attention, this stranger's unexpected concern, broke through her shock. Yes. She bit me. She actually bit me. Hyunjun nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd already known. Go to the manager. Have him call for medical attention. Someone will take photographs of the injury, document everything. Who are you? The smallest flicker of something, not quite a smile, but close, crossed his face. Someone who doesn't tolerate disrespect in his establishment. His establishment. Understanding dawned slowly. Aliyah glanced at the manager, who'd gone pale and was nodding vigorously, already pulling out his phone. She looked back at this quiet, dangerous man who'd materialized like an avenging angel and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Thank you, she whispered. He inclined his head slightly. You did nothing wrong. Remember that. Then, finally, he turned to Minseo. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Hello, Minseo. His voice was conversational, almost pleasant. It's been a while. She'd recovered some of her composure, though her hands were trembling. Hyunjun, this isn't what it looks like. That waitress, she was rude, Stop talking. 2 words delivered with such quiet finality that Minseo's mouth clicked shut. Hyunjun pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, his movements unhurried. He folded his hands on the table, studying her the way an entomologist might study a particularly unpleasant insect. Behind him, his security detail positioned themselves strategically, cutting off any exit. Do you remember? Hyunjun said softly. Why I removed you from my life? Minseo's companion started to stand. I should sit. Hyunjun didn't look at her. But she sat immediately, her face white. Hyunjun, please. Do you remember? He repeated, and there was something terrible in his patience. Minseo swallowed hard. You said I was reckless, that I didn't understand discretion. I said you were dangerous. I said you thought cruelty was power. I said you enjoyed hurting people weaker than you because it made you feel strong. His eyes never left her face. I was right, wasn't I? That waitress disrespected me. She brought you food. You assaulted her because she gave you an excuse to indulge your cruelty. Hyunjun leaned forward slightly. You bit her, Minseo, like an animal. In front of witnesses. In my restaurant. The emphasis on my was subtle but unmistakable. Minseo's eyes widened. Your restaurant? I didn't know. Hyunjun, if I'd known you were here, I would never. There it is. His voice was colder now. You would never have done it if you'd known I was watching. Not because it was wrong, not because she's a human being who deserves dignity, but because you might face consequences. He sat back, his expression one of mild disgust. When I ended things with you, I told you that you'd have to learn to survive without my protection, without my resources, without the lifestyle I provided. Do you remember what you said? Minseo said nothing, her face crumbling. You said you'd be fine. You said you didn't need me. You said there were plenty of other men who'd give you what you wanted. Hyunjun glanced around the restaurant, at the watching faces, the raised phones. How's that working out? Please, Minseo whispered. Don't do this. Do what? Hold you accountable? Let you face the consequences of your actions? He stood, and his voice dropped to something that barely qualified as sound. You put your hands on someone I've decided to protect. You committed assault in my establishment. You humiliated a woman who's working 2 jobs to support her daughter, who's done nothing but serve you with professionalism and grace. Minseo's face went white. How do you... I notice things. It's how I've stayed alive. He gestured to the manager, who approached immediately, his face grave. Call the police. I want a formal report filed for assault. I want photographs of the injury. I want every witness statement collected. And I want security footage pulled and preserved. Right away, Mr. Choi. Hyunjun, no. Minseo grabbed for his arm, desperation making her reckless. His security moved instantly, intercepting her, their hands firm but not rough as they pulled her back. Hyunjun looked at her with something approaching pity. You thought you were powerful because you could hurt someone without consequences, he said quietly. Let me teach you what real power looks like. The next 30 minutes unfolded like a carefully orchestrated performance, and Hyunjun was the invisible conductor. First came the manager, profusely apologetic, personally escorting Aaliyah to the private office where he administered first aid with shaking hands. A photographer, who appeared from nowhere, one of Hyunjun's people, documented the bite mark from multiple angles, professional and thorough. The manager kept apologizing, promising this had never happened before, assuring her that Lumiere took care of its staff. Mr. Choi has instructed me to offer you immediate medical care at the hospital of your choice, fully covered, the manager said, his voice nervous. And of course, you'll receive full pay for tonight and any shifts you need to miss for recovery. And he's also instructed that you receive compensation for the assault. We're talking about a substantial sum. Aaliyah sat in the office chair, her arm bandaged, her mind still trying to process everything. Who is he? Really? The manager hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Mr. Choi is a private investor, a partner in several establishments, a man of considerable influence. He paused. And not someone you want as an enemy. Outside in the dining room, Minseo was learning that lesson the hard way. The police had arrived, 2 officers who'd taken one look at the scene and immediately called for a supervisor. Assault in a place like Lumiere, with witnesses from the city's elite watching, required delicate handling. But when Hyunjun had quietly approached the senior officer, had exchanged a few words in an undertone, the officer's expression had shifted from professional neutrality to something harder. Ma'am, you're going to need to come with us, the officer said to Minseo, who'd tried to shrink into her chair. This is ridiculous. I'm not going anywhere. Do you know who I... Ma'am, we have multiple witnesses to an assault. We have photographic evidence of injury. We have security footage. You can come voluntarily, or I can place you under arrest right here. Your choice. Minseo looked around desperately, seeking an ally. Someone who'd defend her. But the other diners looked away, uncomfortable, wanting no part of this mess. Her companion had already left, slipping out during the confusion. She was alone. Hyunjun. She tried one last time, her voice breaking. Please. I'm sorry. I'll apologize to her. I'll do whatever you want. Please don't do this to me. He'd been standing near his booth, watching everything unfold with that same calm detachment. Now he approached her one final time, and his voice was soft enough that only she could hear. 2 years ago, I told you that cruelty had consequences, that the world you'd grown comfortable in, the protection, the privilege, the ability to act without accountability, only existed because of me. You didn't believe me. He glanced at the officers waiting nearby. Now you'll learn. I'll be ruined, she whispered. This will be everywhere. Everyone will know. Yes, he agreed simply. They will. They'll know that you assaulted a service worker in a crowded restaurant. They'll know you bit her like an animal. They'll see the footage. They'll read the witness statements. And they'll know that when you finally faced consequences for your cruelty, you begged for mercy, you never showed anyone else. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. I'm sorry. Tell her that, not me. He stepped back, nodding to the officers. She's all yours. They led her out through the restaurant, and if Hyunjun had orchestrated it this way, the public perp walk, the humiliation, the visible fall, no one could prove it, but everyone felt it. Felt the message being sent. This is what happens. This is what protection looks like. This is the price of crossing certain lines. Several diners were recording on their phones. By morning, the footage would be everywhere. Social media, gossip sites, whispered conversations in the circles Minseo had once moved through with confidence. Her name would become synonymous with entitled cruelty, with the kind of behavior that even the wealthy found distasteful. She was finished, and Hyunjun felt nothing but cold satisfaction. It was past midnight when Aaliyah finally emerged from the office. The restaurant had mostly cleared out, though a few staff members remained, cleaning and whispering. The manager had been extraordinarily solicitous, had pressed an envelope into her hands with more cash than she made in 2 months, had promised she could take as much time as she needed. She'd told him she'd be back for her next shift. She needed the money. Hyunjun was still there, sitting in his corner booth, the glass of whiskey he'd been nursing hours ago still barely touched. His security had retreated to the shadows, but she could feel their presence, watchful and protective. He looked up when she approached, and something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly. You should be going home, he said. I wanted to thank you, Aaliyah replied, her voice still slightly unsteady. I don't understand what happened tonight, or who you are, or why you helped me, but thank you. Hyunjun gestured to the seat across from him. Sit, please. She hesitated, then did, setting her bag down carefully. Up close, she could see the details the distance had hidden, the scar along his jawline, the calluses on his hands that suggested violence was no stranger, the weariness in his eyes that matched her own. What you saw tonight, he began slowly, was someone facing consequences they'd avoided for a long time. That woman, Minseo. She was part of my life once. I made the mistake of confusing beauty with substance, and when I realized my error, I removed her. Completely. She didn't accept it well. She's your ex-girlfriend, Aaliyah said, understanding dawning. She was someone who thought my world, my resources, gave her permission to treat others as beneath her. I disagreed. Strongly. He took a small sip of his whiskey. When I saw her here tonight, I knew something bad would happen. I just didn't know it would be you. But why did you? Aaliyah stopped, reformulating the question. You didn't have to do all this. You could have just, I don't know, kicked her out. I could have. His eyes met hers, dark and honest. But I've spent my life watching people with power abuse those without it. I've been on both sides of that equation, and I've learned that sometimes, the only way to stop cruelty is to make the cost of it unbearable. There was a weight to his words, a history she couldn't fully grasp. The manager called you Mr. Choi. He said you're an investor. I am, among other things. Hyunjun's smile was thin. I'm what people call when they have problems that need unconventional solutions. I operate in spaces where the law is flexible. And I've built something that requires absolute loyalty and absolute discretion. Aaliyah's eyes widened slightly. You're careful with labels, he interrupted gently. Labels attract attention. Let's just say I'm someone who understands power dynamics intimately and who believes that power should protect, not prey. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the night settling between them. I saw you earlier, Hyunjun continued. Before any of this happened, I saw you pocket a bread roll when you thought no one was looking. Shame colored Aaliyah's face. I'm sorry, don't apologize. You were taking it home for your daughter. She stared at him. How did you? I pay attention. It's how I've survived. He leaned forward slightly. You work 2 jobs. You're exhausted. You're holding yourself together through pure determination because you have someone depending on you. I respect that more than I can express. Tears welled up in Alia's eyes again, but this time they were different. Not shock or pain, but the overwhelming relief of being seen. Actually seen. Her name is Amara, she whispered. She's 6, and she's the only thing that matters. Then let me help. Hyunjun reached into his jacket and pulled out a card, sliding it across the table. This has my private number. If you or your daughter ever need anything, medical care, legal help, protection, you call me. No questions, no debt. Just call. Aaliyah picked up the card with shaking hands. I don't understand. Why would you do this for me? Because I can. Because you were hurt in my establishment while doing your job with dignity and professionalism. Because I watched you maintain your composure when someone tried to strip it away. His voice was quiet but fierce. And because in my world, when someone crosses the line, when they harm someone under my protection, there are consequences. You're under my protection now, whether you asked for it or not. I don't even know you. You know enough. You know I keep my word. You know I don't tolerate cruelty. That's more than most people can say. He stood, and his security detail materialized beside him. Go home to your daughter. Take the time you need to heal. And if anyone ever makes you feel less than you are, if anyone ever tries to dehumanize you again, you have my number. Aaliyah stood too, clutching the card like a lifeline. What happens to her? Minseo? She'll be charged with assault. The footage is already everywhere. My people made sure of it. By morning, her name will be mud in every circle she once moved in. She'll lose whatever social capital she had left, whatever connections she'd built. She'll learn what it's like to be powerless. To be looked through instead of looked at. His expression was hard. She'll learn what you already know. That dignity isn't given by others. It's something you carry inside. And she has none. I almost feel sorry for her. Don't. She made her choices. She hurt you not because you failed her, but because she could. Because causing pain made her feel powerful. That's not someone who deserves sympathy. Hyunjun tilted his head slightly, studying her. You're a good person, Aaliyah Daniels. Better than most. That's rare in my experience. He turned to leave, his security moving with him like shadows, but Aaliyah's voice stopped him. Mr. Choi? He glanced back. Why were you really here tonight? You said your meeting ended hours ago. You could have left. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Something almost vulnerable. I don't know, he admitted. Sometimes my instincts tell me to stay, to watch, to wait. I've learned to trust them. Maybe you were supposed to be here, Aaliyah said softly. Maybe that's why you stayed. Hyunjun smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from dangerous to something almost gentle. Maybe, or maybe I just recognized someone worth protecting when I saw them. He nodded once, formal and final. Good night, Miss Daniels. Take care of yourself. And your daughter. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night with his shadows, leaving Aaliyah standing in the empty restaurant with a card in her hand and the strange, settling knowledge that her life had just been changed by a man who lived in a world she didn't understand. But somehow, that didn't frighten her. Because she'd seen something in his eyes that she recognized. The same thing she saw in her own mirror every morning. Survival. Dignity. The fierce determination to protect what mattered. Maybe they weren't so different after all. 3 days later, Aaliyah returned to work at Lumiere. Her arm still hurt, but the bite mark was healing, and she'd been cleared by the doctor Hyunjun had sent to her apartment, a private physician who'd been thorough and kind and hadn't charged her a penny. The staff treated her differently now. With respect. With careful attention. The manager had pulled her aside and assured her that she had a position here for as long as she wanted it, that Mr. Choi had made it very clear she was valued. The story had spread like wildfire. Social media had exploded with the footage, Minseo being let out in handcuffs, her face twisted with tears and rage, her designer dress incongruous against the harsh reality of her arrest. Think pieces had been written. Twitter threads had dissected every detail. Former friends and associates had lined up to share their own stories of Minseo's cruelty, now that it was safe to do so. She'd been charged with assault. The trial was pending. Her lawyer had tried to argue about her mental state, about the stress she'd been under, but the video was damning. You couldn't spin teeth marks into anything but what they were. Aaliyah tried not to follow the news, tried not to feel satisfaction at Minseo's downfall, but she was human, and there was a small dark part of her that felt vindicated. That felt like justice, however messy, had been served. She hadn't called the number on the card, hadn't needed to. But she kept it in her wallet, a talisman, a reminder that someone powerful had seen her humanity and defended it. Amara had noticed the card one morning, had pulled it out with her small fingers. "What's this, Mama?" "Just a friend's number," Aaliyah had said, tucking it carefully away. "A friend from work?" "Something like that, baby." But that night, as she tucked Amara into bed, kissed her forehead and whispered the same promise she always did, "I'll always protect you, always keep you safe," Aaliyah realized something profound. She wasn't alone anymore. There were people in the world who believed that cruelty should have consequences, that dignity mattered, that service workers were human beings deserving of respect and protection, and one of those people had more power than she could imagine. That thought should have frightened her. Instead, it comforted her, because power, she'd learned, wasn't inherently good or evil. It was how you used it that mattered, and Choi Hyun-jun had used his to defend someone who couldn't defend herself, had made it clear that in his world, in the spaces he controlled, humanity mattered more than money or status or privilege. That was rare. That was precious. That was worth believing in. Across the city, in an office that technically didn't exist, Hyun-jun reviewed the reports on his desk. Security footage from Lumiere, copied and backed up in 3 separate locations. Witness statements, all consistent. Medical documentation of Aaliyah's injury. The police report with Minseo's mugshot attached. Her face blotchy from crying, her expensive makeup ruined, her eyes wide with the dawning realization that her world had collapsed. Jae-sung stood across from him, arms crossed, his expression carefully neutral. "The story's everywhere. CNN picked it up this morning. Elite diner, arrested for assaulting waitress in upscale restaurant. They're running the footage on loop." "Good," Hyun-jun said simply. "Some people are asking questions. About you. About why the police responded so quickly. Why the charges are being pursued so aggressively." Jae-sung paused. "The DA's office is treating this like a priority case. That's not normal for simple assault. The DA and I have an understanding. An understanding that could draw attention we don't need." Hyun-jun looked up from the reports, his eyes sharp. "You think I made a mistake?" It wasn't a question, but Jae-sung answered anyway. "I think you exposed yourself for someone you don't know. Someone who could become a liability." "She's not a liability. She's a single mother working 2 jobs who was assaulted in front of 50 witnesses and almost walked away thinking it was somehow her fault." Hyun-jun's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "That doesn't sit right with me. Since when do we involve ourselves in—" "Since I decided to." The words were soft, but final. "This is my organization. My rules. And one of my rules is that people who work in my establishments, who operate under my protection, don't get brutalized by entitled psychopaths who think money buys them the right to hurt others." Jae-sung held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Understood. What about Minseo? She's making noise. Her lawyer's trying to negotiate." "Let her make noise. Let her lawyer waste her money. The evidence is airtight. She committed assault in a room full of the city's elite, with cameras running and multiple witnesses documenting everything." Hyun-jun leaned back in his chair. There's no amount of money or legal maneuvering that can erase that. She's done. She's threatening to talk. About you. About your business. She knows nothing. I made sure of that when we were together. Hyunjun's smile was cold. And even if she did know something, who would believe her? A disgraced woman facing assault charges, trying to blame the man who left her? It looks like revenge, not revelation. Still, boss, I want surveillance on her. Make sure she doesn't do anything stupid. But otherwise, let the legal system handle it. Sometimes the cleanest solutions are the legitimate ones. He closed the folder containing Minseo's mugshot. She wanted to know what real power looked like. Now she knows. It's not screaming or violence or public displays. It's watching your entire life crumble while the person who caused it never raises their voice. Jae-sung almost smiled. Brutal. Appropriate. Hyunjun stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city. The glittering lights that represented millions of lives, millions of stories, millions of small injustices that went unanswered. We can't fix everything, but when something happens right in front of us, when someone under our protection is harmed, we respond. We make it clear that there are lines that shouldn't be crossed. And the waitress? Aaliyah? I gave her my card. If she needs help, she'll call. If she doesn't, then she continues her life knowing someone saw what happened to her and gave a damn. Hyunjun turned from the window. Either way, she knows she's not invisible anymore. You think she'll call? I don't know. Part of me hopes she doesn't. That she never needs to. That life treats her better from here on out. He paused. But if she does, we'll be ready. You like her? It wasn't really a question, but Hyunjun considered it anyway. I respect her. There's a difference. She's strong in ways that matter. The kind of strength that doesn't require violence or power. Just endurance. Dignity. The will to keep going even when everything's stacked against you. He met Jae-sung's eyes. That's worth protecting. Jae-sung nodded slowly. I'll keep the surveillance on Minseo. And I'll make sure word spreads through our networks. Aaliyah Daniels is under your protection. Anyone who harms her answers to you. Good. And Jae-sung? Hyunjun's voice stopped him at the door. Make sure some of our people keep an eye on her building. Discreetly. She lives in a rough neighborhood. I want to know if there are any problems. Already done, boss. I put a team on it the night of the incident. Hyunjun smiled faintly. That's why you're my second. After Jae-sung left, Hyunjun returned to the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. The city stretched out before him, indifferent to individual suffering, indifferent to small acts of cruelty or kindness. But he wasn't indifferent. Couldn't be. He'd built his empire on the understanding that loyalty was earned through protection. That power meant nothing if it couldn't defend those who needed defending. Some called him a criminal. Others called him a businessman. He called himself a realist. Someone who understood that the world was divided between those with power and those without, and that the only thing that mattered was which side you chose to protect. He thought about Aaliyah's tired eyes, her genuine smile, the way she'd maintained her dignity even as Minseo had tried to strip it away. Thought about the bread roll in her pocket, stolen for her daughter. Thought about the thousands of people like her, working multiple jobs, holding themselves together through sheer force of will, invisible to the wealthy patrons they served. Someone needed to see them. Someone needed to care. And if that someone was a man who lived in the shadows, who operated outside the law, who commanded respect through fear and loyalty in equal measure, well, maybe that was exactly what the world needed. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Choi, this is Aaliyah. I just wanted to say thank you again. What you did for me, I'll never forget it. If there's ever anything I can do for you, please let me know. Hyunjun stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. You already did it. You showed grace under pressure. You maintained your humanity when someone tried to take it away. That's more valuable than you know. Take care of yourself and your daughter. That's all I ask. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. then appeared again. Finally. I will. Thank you. He pocketed his phone and turned from the window. There was work to do. Shipments to track. Deals to negotiate. Problems to solve. The machinery of his organization never stopped, never slept. But tonight, for just a moment, he let himself feel something that had become rare in his line of work. Satisfaction. Not at Minseo's destruction, though that had its own cold justice, but at the knowledge that one person, one tired, hard-working single mother, would go to bed tonight knowing that someone powerful had seen her worth and defended it. In a world full of cruelty, that was something. Maybe it was everything. 3 weeks later, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, their cameras and microphones creating a forest of technology pointed at the doors. Inside, the preliminary hearing for People vs. Minseo Kim had just concluded, and the result had been everything Hyunjun had orchestrated. Bail set at $100,000, charges moving forward. Trial date scheduled for 3 months out. Minseo emerged flanked by her lawyer, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses that couldn't quite conceal the weight she'd lost. The hollow look that came from 3 weeks of social exile. Her once pristine appearance had degraded. Expensive clothes hanging slightly wrong, hair professionally styled, but somehow still lifeless. The reporters surged forward. Ms. Kim, do you have any comment on the charges? Have you tried to contact the victim? Is it true you've been blacklisted from several restaurants and social clubs? She kept walking, her lawyer's hand on her elbow, steering her toward a waiting car. But one reporter's question cut through the noise. Do you regret what you did? Minseo stopped. For just a moment she turned, and even through the sunglasses, there was something broken in her posture. I regret everything, she said quietly, and then she was gone, disappearing into the car before anyone could follow up. The footage would air that night. The soundbite would spread. But it wouldn't save her. Nothing would. Aaliyah watched the news coverage on her phone during her break at her other job, the diner where she worked mornings before heading to Lumiere in the evenings. Amara was at school, thriving in the after-school program that Aaliyah's new financial stability had made possible. The compensation from Lumiere had been substantial, enough to pay down debt, to breathe a little easier, to stop stealing bread rolls because she could actually afford groceries. The manager had also given her a raise, unprompted, along with a promise that she was valued and protected. Protected. That word had taken on new meaning in the past 3 weeks. She'd noticed things, small things that might have been coincidence, but felt like something more. The broken streetlight near her apartment building that had suddenly been repaired. The group of teenagers who'd been dealing drugs on her corner, suddenly gone. The landlord who'd been threatening eviction over a late payment, suddenly willing to work out a payment plan. Little miracles. Or maybe not miracles at all. She'd wanted to call the number on the card a dozen times, to ask if it was him, if he was responsible, if she was imagining the invisible hand that seemed to be smoothing her path. But she never did. Some things were better left unspoken. Some kindnesses better left unacknowledged. Besides, she understood now. This was what protection looked like in his world. Not grand gestures or public declarations, but quiet actions that made life a little less brutal, a little more bearable. She could live with that. More than that, she was grateful for it. Her phone buzzed. A text from the Lumiere manager. Mr. Choi will be dining with us tonight, table 15. He's requested you as his server if you're comfortable with that. Aaliyah's heart jumped. She typed back, Of course, I'll be there. Hyunjun arrived at Lumiere at 8, dressed in his usual understated elegance. Dark suit, no tie, the kind of casual sophistication that came from confidence rather than effort. The staff greeted him with the deference he'd earned, the manager personally escorting him to table 15, the same table where the elderly woman who'd tipped Aliyah generously once sat. He ordered a whiskey and waited. Aliyah appeared 5 minutes later, her uniform crisp, her smile genuine but slightly nervous. Good evening, Mr. Choi. Good evening, Ms. Daniels. He gestured to the seat across from him. Would you join me? I promise I'm not here to inspect your service. I'm here to have a conversation. She glanced around. The manager nodded encouragingly and carefully sat down. I'm technically working. I own 30% of this establishment. I think I can authorize a brief conversation with one of my most valued employees. His eyes were kind. How are you? Really? I'm better. Good, actually. The money that the restaurant gave me, it changed things, made things easier. And my daughter, she's doing so well in her program now that I'm not constantly stressed about money. Aaliyah paused, choosing her words carefully. And other things have gotten better too. Small things. Things that might be coincidences. Might be. Hyunjun agreed, his expression giving nothing away. Are they? Coincidences? He took a sip of his whiskey. Does it matter? If your life is better, if you and your daughter are safe and stable, does it matter how it happened? It matters because I don't like owing people. And if you've been helping, then I owe you more than I can ever repay. You owe me nothing. His voice was firm. What happened to you was wrong. What I did was basic human decency. Something that should be normal, but apparently isn't. You don't owe me for that any more than you'd owe someone for pulling you out of traffic. But, Aaliyah. The use of her first name was intimate, warm. I've spent my life operating in a world where everything is transactional, where every favor carries a debt, where kindness is a weakness to be exploited. It's exhausting. And it's not how I want to live, not completely. He leaned forward slightly. Let me be clear. I helped you because I wanted to. Because seeing someone strong and dignified being torn down by someone cruel offended me on a fundamental level. I don't want your money. I don't want your loyalty beyond what you'd give any decent person. I certainly don't want you to feel indebted. Then what do you want? The question hung between them, honest and direct. Hyunjun smiled faintly. I want you to keep being who you are. Keep working hard for your daughter. Keep maintaining your dignity in a world that doesn't always respect it. And maybe, if you're comfortable with it, I'd like you to know that you have someone in your corner. Not because you have to, but because you deserve to. Tears pricked at Aliyah's eyes. I don't understand you. You're this powerful, dangerous man who runs in circles I can't even imagine, and you're sitting here telling me I matter. Why? Because you do matter. Because your daughter matters. Because the world is full of minseos. People who think cruelty is power, and it needs more people like you to balance it out. He finished his whiskey. I'm not a good man, Aaliyah. I've done things that would horrify you. But I try, in my own way, to use what I have to protect people who deserve protecting. That's not altruism, it's balance. Karma, maybe. A way to justify the darker parts of what I do. You're not as bad as you think you are. You don't know what I've done. No. But I know what you did for me. And that counts for something. She wiped her eyes quickly, maintaining composure. The hearing was today. I saw it on the news. I know. The trial will be in 3 months. You'll likely have to testify. I'm ready. I want to. She needs to face consequences. Aaliyah's voice was steady. Not because I hate her, but because what she did was wrong. And maybe if she faces real consequences, she'll think twice before hurting someone else. That's very gracious of you. More gracious than she deserves. Maybe. But I don't want to be like her. I don't want to let cruelty turn me cruel. She met his eyes. You taught me that. That night, when you were so calm, so controlled, you could have destroyed her in so many ways. But you chose justice instead. Legal, public justice. That meant something. Hyunjun was quiet for a moment. Something shifting in his expression. You see too much. I see someone trying to do better. That's worth respecting. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, Two people from completely different worlds who'd found an unexpected understanding. Finally, Hyunjun stood. I should let you get back to work, but before I go, he pulled out an envelope and set it on the table. Amara's 6th birthday is next week, correct? Aaliyah's eyes widened. How did you? I pay attention. This is for her. Not money. Just something I thought she might enjoy. A trust fund that she can access when she turns 18, managed by a firm I trust. Enough to pay for college, to give her options, to make sure she never has to watch her mother work herself to exhaustion just to survive. Mr. Choi, I can't accept. Yes, you can. And you will. Not for you. For Amara. Every child deserves a chance at something better. Consider it an investment in the future. He smiled. Besides, I have no children of my own, no family to speak of. Let me do this. Please. Aaliyah clutched the envelope, tears flowing freely now. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, he replied quietly, for reminding me why I do what I do, for showing me that dignity and strength don't require power or money, just character. He inclined his head, formal and respectful. Take care, Aaliyah Daniels. And if you ever need anything at all, you have my number. Then he was gone, moving through the restaurant with his shadows following, leaving Aaliyah sitting at table 15 with an envelope that represented a future she'd never dared hope for. She opened it with shaking hands and found a birthday card with a hand-drawn picture of a princess, clearly drawn by someone who couldn't draw, which made it somehow more endearing, and a note in precise handwriting. For Amara, on her 6th birthday. May she grow up in a world kinder than this one, and may she always know her mother is a hero. Underneath was a legal document outlining the trust fund, numbers that made Aaliyah's breath catch. Enough to change everything. She clutched the card to her chest and let herself cry. Not from sadness or pain, but from overwhelming relief and gratitude, and the strange, beautiful knowledge that somewhere in this cruel world, someone powerful had decided to use that power for good. Not because he had to, but because he could. And that made all the difference. The end cruelty feels powerful, until it meets someone who understands what real power is for. In a world where the strong often prey on the weak, where service workers are invisible, and dignity is a luxury many can't afford, sometimes justice comes from unexpected places. Sometimes protection arrives not because it's earned, but because it's right. And sometimes, the most dangerous people in the world are the ones who choose to defend those who can't defend themselves. This is that story. This is what happens when someone crosses the line in front of the wrong person. Someone who remembers that power without compassion is just violence with a better address. Remember Aaliyah. Remember that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And remember that the smallest act of cruelty can have consequences beyond imagination, especially when someone is watching who actually gives a damn.